Pozdrav ljudi, mi smo danas ovdje sa jednim jako poznatim piscem, gospodinom Gavrielom Kayom, pa ćemo mu evo sad postaviti nekoliko pitanja, pa evo. Hello, so this is for our viewers. Could you please tell us something? For example, how is your staying here in Croatia? Do you like our country? Do you like the people? Perhaps do you like our food, our cuisine, and everything?
I'll tell you, I keep coming back, so I think that it's obvious that I like Croatia. This is my 4th visit here, working with my publisher, al-rassan. One of the most enjoyable parts of a writer's career is when we're published in other languages, other countries, and you have the opportunity to work with your publishers in another country and to meet your readers in a different country. And I've been very fortunate that way. The books are now in more than 25 languages, and I've had a chance to travel to many places and meet my readers. And with that background, I'll say that with 4 trips to Croatia, this is definitely one of my favorite places to visit and spend time with readers. I actually don't like books that are about a message, that are very heavy with their the thing they're trying to teach you. I don't enjoy reading them, and I try not to write them. I do have, for every book, certain themes, certain ideas that have inspired me to tell that story, to write that book. And I like the readers to come away from finishing the book with an awareness of some of those themes. But the way I describe it usually is I don't want to hit the reader on the head with a hammer, sort of announcing with a headache that this is what I'm telling you. I prefer to stab you in the ribs with a stiletto, so that you don't even realize until you've finished one of the novels that the messages, the themes, the things that were important to me have registered with you after you're done. I prefer to do it quietly that way rather than bang you hard.
Very emancipated female characters, for example. Could you elaborate something about that?
Well, thank you first of all. I don't write female characters strongly for any political reason. It's not a statement. My belief has always been that a good book has interesting things happening to interesting people. If you think about it, that's what I'm trying to do. And also to write it in an interesting way. So, given that I'm trying to create interesting people, it makes obvious sense to me that I want the female characters to be as interesting as I can make them, just as I want the male characters to be interesting. One of the things that challenges me as a writer is to find ways to give the women characters room to maneuver, an opportunity to have an impact on the story without violating the historical reality of the period I'm working with. I don't want the books to be unconvincing in terms of what women were allowed to do at a given time. So that is a writer's challenge, to give the women scope, ambition, opportunity to influence the plot without being wrong for the time or place I'm writing about. That for every book, that's a different sort of challenge.
And when we are talking about characters, could you tell us please, where do you find inspirations for your characters? For example, especially in Fianvar Tapestry, that's probably, that book is probably the dream of every fantasy, sort of say fantasy freak, you know. So for example, in those books, for example in the books The Lance of al-Rassan, or in Song of Arabon, or Tigana perhaps.
There's no formula, there's no rule for me, and I think for most writers. There's no set way in which you create your characters. I think in my case, one of the reasons, perhaps, that readers find the characters strong or important to them is because I'm taking time to develop them. A lot of writers, in fantasy in particular, are very engaged by trying to give you an adventure with the plot, with the story, to keep it moving so that you're caught up in that adventure. And I want to do that too. But at the same time, I want the novel to give enough room so that the characters in the book are complex and believable, and perhaps not strictly black and white, good and evil. I'm trying to let the books allow room for the characters to grow on the reader so that they matter more to the reader. And I think that's one of the reasons it takes me a long time to write them. In a culture where we're supposed to do a book a year, and I'm normally doing one about every 3 years, it's because I'm thinking about the characterization as much as I am about the story.
Does religion play any role, any big role in your life, and does that reflect on on the books you write, or is religion just something, that you have in your way, like most people do?
Well, as I said before, I'm working with history. In all of the books since Vianavar have been, in a sense, more about history than about mythology. So I'm taking my inspiration from different times and places in the past. It's an obvious, simple truth that if you're working with the culture of Islamic Spain or Byzantium in the 6th century or China in the 8th century, faith and religion, whether the religion of the state or a religion that is just emerging, were always central to those periods of history. So I would simply be a bad writer and a bad historian if I didn't let the notion of faith and religion as a cultural element come into the books in a strong way, because it came into history in a strong way. And it's my fantasy history spin on certain events and characters and themes of that astonishingly dramatic, interesting period. It's a love story, it's a war story, it's a family story, this time 2 brothers and a sister. It's also an attempt to show how a culture like that one, writers love this, valued writers so much. Somebody's made the joke at saying, I'm writing a book about a culture that values people like me. Why not? Because the role of poets and writers and the importance of being able to express yourself well was central to your ability to rise in power in that culture. It's so different from so much of the world today, and it interested me.
Perhaps if you have, I assume you go to a lot of conventions, so if you have any, funny anecdote or something that you like to remember and that you would perhaps like to share with us.
I have a lot of stories from 4 different visits here. I've had really interesting conversations with Croatian readers who are some of the most knowledgeable that I've encountered about fantasy as a genre. The most recent anecdote was last night, where they very cleverly at Liburnicon smuggled me into the parking lot last night so that I could be the mystery final contestant in a trivia contest on my work. And there was a very charming young woman who apparently had won the contest, who then was told she hadn't quite won it yet because she'd have to beat the author in the final round of a trivia contest. And of course we set it up a little bit differently, but the look on her face when the author comes through the crowd and she has to answer trivia better than the writer of the books was actually pretty good. And I thought it was a very cleverly set up twist by the organizers of Liburnicon.
Thank you. And that's about it. Hvala ljudi, to je bilo to. Pozdrav.